It's been 15 years since what became known as the perfect storm battered the East Coast from Maine to North Carolina with wind and waves, and that anniversary has received lots of media attention the last few days. A Penn State meteorology grad named Bob Case was deputy director of the Boston Weather Service office at that time in 1991, and he actually coined the name the perfect storm that became the title of a best-selling book and big screen movie. One odd aspect of that storm was that it actually backed up toward the coast for a while from the northeast, an unusual direction for storms to move. But in this age of high-tech satellite imagery and computer models, the storm was actually predicted pretty well. Almost 250 years earlier, on this date in 1743, Ben Franklin was observing a powerful colonial storm that behaved more typically, and what he learned became a foundation of modern weather forecasting. At the time, Franklin was a 37-year-old Philadelphia publisher and editor. He was planning on watching a lunar eclipse the evening of November 1st, but was disappointed when clouds moved in and blocked the view. The storm that ruined his plans brought strong northeast winds and heavy rain to Philadelphia, but the storm was even worse up the coast in Boston, where a Harvard professor named John Winthrop had just started regular weather observations. He noted the weather in Boston on November 2nd as northeast by north, meaning the wind direction. Worst in years, great damage on land as well as at sea. However, the stormy weather didn't get to Boston until after the eclipse, and this surprised Franklin because the prevailing theory of the day was that storms moved with the surface winds, which had been from the northeast in Philadelphia as the storm arrived. Franklin wrote, "This puzzles me, because being a northeast storm, I imagined it must have begun sooner in places farther to the northeast than it did in Philadelphia." Now, this eclipse experience inspired Franklin to collect data on this storm and others like it, and his explanation was a century ahead of its time. He proposed that the large storms that often pummeled the coast for days moved from the southwest toward the northeast, even though the winds ahead of them blew from the northeast. He wrote, "Of these I have a very singular opinion that though the course of the wind is from northeast to southwest, the course of the storm is from southwest to northeast. The air is in violent motion in Virginia before it moves in Connecticut." With hardly any data to work with, Franklin had figured out the general west to east movement of weather that we now take for granted. And in doing so, he laid the groundwork for what's now called synoptic meteorology, the analysis and forecasting of large-scale weather systems. Fred will be back with a little bit of synoptic meteorology in the extended forecast next.